River Road African American Museum.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome home.
Well,
to
thank you.
Donaldsonville and Ascension
Absolutely.
Parish.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I'd like to take this opportunity to just ask you a few questions about your family background, growing up, and your education, which has led to where you are today. And so it'll be maybe 5 or 6 questions, and I'll give you the opportunity to just tell us and share whatever you feel is necessary.
Well, you know, it is good to be here in Donaldsonville today. It really feels good. I was born in Lemonville, with a little unincorporated section just at the foot of the Sunshine Bridge, and when I was born in 1943, I guess the nearest hospital must have been Charity in New Orleans or someplace in Baton Rouge, but we were all delivered by midwives. And so my mom, Olivia Joshua, my dad, Frank Joshua, served in the U.S. Navy. And in fact, I tell the story all the time. My dad was in the Philippines, and when I was born, and didn't actually see me until I was about 6 months old. All of his career, we knew he was in the Seabees and served in the Pacific, the war in the Pacific, and I thought Seabees were the letter. No, I thought it was C, S-E-A-B-E-E, but learned later that CB meant Construction Battalion. And blacks were, and I forgot the number of his construction battalion, but that's why he learned construction skills. And after the war, and of course, you know, here in Ascension Parish, the only work was sugar cane and rice, and rice fields and sugar cane fields. And if you went up to Ponchatoula, you're picking strawberries, but it's all agricultural. And so that's why we moved to New Orleans. But I was telling you earlier the story. I started school in the one-room schoolhouse right there in Lemonville. It was one room. All of my cousins, we were all in the same room, which I guess gives a child a different comfort level because there's some older cousins right there in the room with you. My brother is 2 years older. And Sigmund started school, and I thought, well, it must be time for me to go to school. And so I was crying every day to go to school, and Miss Britton, B.R. Britton, who I'm assuming must have been the principal, told my mother, just send her to school. So I started school early. We were in school that year and then moved to New Orleans, finished school in New Orleans, public schools all the way, and all the schools were segregated. Despite Brown against Board of Education, when I finished high school in New Orleans in 1960, the high schools were still segregated. And in fact, the Leona Tate and Prevost and all of these girls who desegregated the schools, that would have been the September after I finished high school and went on to college in Atlanta. So I got a scholarship to Spelman College. I benefited from all of those dedicated teachers in those black schools, folk who, without resources, without books that had been handed down from white schools, raggedy books, outdated books, and we still learned how to read. We still learned math. We were still able to compete, and we were still able to succeed. And so we really owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to those black teachers, African American teachers over the years who struggled despite segregation and racism, and despite all the challenges, resources, buildings, books. We didn't have the science labs and telescopes and all of the other fancy things that all of the other schools had. But despite all of that, we were able to succeed.
So you mentioned, I think it's just a sweet memory that you remember crying at the fence while watching your brothers and sisters and cousins go to school. So you're like crying to go to school when most children cry to stay home these days. So that was just interesting. How old were you, would you say, when you stepped into that first classroom at the Lemonville College School?
I should have been 4 or 5 because I finished high school at, graduation at 16, and then I made 17. I was 17 years old immediately after graduation, and when I got to Spelman College, I was still 17.
And when and why did you choose law? What sparked a career in law? What sparked that, and about when or how old were you then?
Well, the civil rights struggle. I remember very well Brown against Board of Education was the decision coming down. Miss Zenobia Johnson was the principal of McCarty Elementary, and I should have been somewhere 7th, 8th grade or thereabouts when that decision, Supreme Court case was decided. And I remember very well that everybody thought that the schools would be immediately desegregated. I thought I would be going to the high school because we were living in the lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans. I thought I would be going to Nichols High School on St. Claude Avenue, but of course, despite the lawsuit and despite the decision of the court, it still said it could be done with deliberate speed, which meant that the states just took years to, and it took further litigation. One of my jobs during the summer when I finished Spelman College, I had the opportunity to work with some civil rights lawyers with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and they had judgments all over the South desegregating schools, but still you had to sue every school board in order to enforce the judgment. And folk think this was an easy task, that all the Legal Defense Fund had to do was sue the state of Louisiana. No, they had to sue 64 parish school boards, and so there are lawsuits all over the state. One in Caddo, I remember I was in Caddo one summer working with Attorney Jesse Stone, and Senator J. Bennett Johnson was in court that day arguing for Caddo's parish school board. I worked in Opelousas and New Iberia and Patterson, just outside of Morgan City, and in every parish, the Legal Defense Fund was required to file a lawsuit, get a judgment, and then you could send black kids to a desegregated school. And then, of course, my work, which is how I got involved with this whole civil rights struggle. I was working for Legal Defense Fund in all these states, South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, and I would go into a community, and it was my job to talk with parents and try to encourage them to send their kids to those desegregated schools. And so here I am sitting on the front steps telling parents, look, we've got a judgment now in Gadsden or Montgomery or whatever, and you need to send your child to school. Most states, they started the process in first grade. Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock was Arkansas was one of the few states that decided to desegregate from the top, which meant we had high school kids facing haters. But here in Louisiana and most southern states, you've got first graders who've got to run a gauntlet, and with folks spewing hate and calling them names and throwing things at them, and you've got to call for U.S. Marshals to escort them into the building. So I worked on those cases, and after after some of doing that, and I worked with some great lawyers, and that's when I decided to go to apply to law school, and I'd been admitted to Boston University, University of North Carolina, and some other law schools, but LSU had not had a black student in 10 years. Dutch Moriel and Collins were the first two black students. They graduated, and then for 10 years there were no black students. So I enrolled and started law school in September of 1965. I thought I was going to be the only black student there, but fortunately, Gamille Gray, who was from Baton Rouge, was also my classmate. I didn't expect her, and she didn't expect me. I'd gone to Spelman College, and Gamille had gone to school at Indiana University. And so we just wound up at LSU at the same time, and had the benefit of having another black student to study with.
Where were you, and if you don't mind telling us, how old were you on the day that Ruby Bridges and Leona Tate and those other girls walked into those schools?
I would have been.
Remember where you were?
I was 17, and I would have been in Atlanta. We talking about the fall of 1960. I graduated from Coyne High School. I was valedictorian of my class and got a scholarship to Spelman, which is how I wound up in Atlanta. But I left New Orleans and was in Atlanta when all of these girls desegregated the school systems here in that fall of 1960.
Can you tell me, how did you feel knowing that this was happening in New Orleans where your family lived? Or can you tell me something about how you felt in seeing that happen in New Orleans?
Progress, finally. It's kind of like finally we, because you see, I grew up in New Orleans, riding buses with a sign, and you move the sign back and forth because the colored signs on everything, public accommodations, and everything is white and black, colored restrooms and colored restaurants and white only drinking fountains, and you can't go to Audubon Park, and you don't go to Pontchartrain Beach, and we go to Lincoln Beach. So it was the crack. It's finally Brown against Board of Education's being enforced.
You brought something to donate to the museum, and you've also sent us some photographs of yourself on the judge's bench, which we plan to add to our exhibit that's going to be at the Rosenwald School. That exhibit will be on the history of black education in sugarcane country.
Okay.
But will you tell us something about what you brought to share with me? Maybe share with us.
Well, I wanted to. This is the portrait by Ulrich Jean-Pierre. He's a Haitian artist who did the portrait that's on display at the museum at the Louisiana Supreme Court. But I had this little magazine was done by it's the Boulevard magazine. It was done by a group of merchants on Oretha Castle Haley Boulevard in New Orleans, and I had some extra copies made because it tells a little bit about my early history, growing up in New Orleans, going to Spelman College. It also has a picture of my law school class where, as I said, Gamille Gray and I were the first two black women to graduate from from LSU Law School. And then there are pictures from my investiture when in 2013 in February, where I was installed as the 25th Chief Justice of the Louisiana Supreme Court. The second woman, because Chief Justice Catherine Kimball preceded me, but the first African American Chief Justice in Louisiana's history.
Can you show us the front of the what you're doing,
Sure.
what you're giving to us?
Sure.
And maybe just open it up and so that we can see some of. I'll take that.
I'll just put it right here.
Yeah. Just kind of show us the. Yeah, she brought us several copies of this. So these are actually photographs that you have in your personal collection, right?
Yeah, these are my personal photographs.
Yes.
This is me at about 8 years old. I would have been at McCarty Elementary. I said Ms. Zenobia Johnson was our principal. That's now the Martin Luther King High School on South Claiborne and Caffin Avenue in Lower 9. My parents bought a house in Pontchartrain Park, and we moved there, I think, in 1957. Pontchartrain Park, as you know, was the first black subdivision, first subdivision for black families because of all the restrictions. You could live anywhere, but could you get a mortgage anywhere? And this was a subdivision where they were making loans available to black families, and you could use your GI Bill for a mortgage. So my father had the military background and could use a GI Bill for a mortgage. So that's how we wound up in Pontchartrain Park.
What street did you live on in Pontchartrain?
Mithra Street.
You lived on Mithra? Okay.
Mithra Street.
Yes.
Right there where Cargill Elementary, and my family was in the next block. That's my dad and my mom. That's their wedding picture. They were married in January 1941. As I said, my mother's now 99. I was elected a trial judge at Civil District Court in 1984. Dutch Morial was my mentor, and he helped me and was a tremendous resource and assistance. He hired me as his law clerk after I finished LSU. He had gone to LSU, I had gone to LSU, and so he was proud of me and helped me all of those years. And I was elected I was working as a city attorney for the city of New Orleans. He was the first black mayor. There was a vacancy at Civil District Court, and he supported me. I was sworn in. This is Justice Revius Ortigue, who was the first black African-American elected to the Louisiana Supreme Court. And he and I served on the Civil District Court together. This is Judge Federoff, another colleague. This is a picture of Gamil Gray and me. We on the steps of LSU Law School with our classmates, and as I said, we were the only two black African Americans in that class. My son, David, my daughter, Rachel, who's a judge at Civil District Court, on the day I was sworn in, my investiture as Chief Justice.
I was there.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. It was a wonderful occasion, and this is a picture we took of black judges. It's extraordinary. I have a book, a volume that shows that when I was elected in 1984, there were perhaps 8 black judges in the state of Louisiana, and this is how many we had at this time. From 8. We had a couple of judges in Baton Rouge, 3 or 4 in New Orleans, and Judge Carl Stewart up in Shreveport. But we had 8 black judges. This is a picture of my family, my brother, my sister-in-law, my daughter, and my mother, Olivia Joshua. You love your country, and then but we've been subjected to some terrible abuses. You know, the lynchings and I mean, well, you know, we start with in the whole of the ship, and then the slavery and the plantations and all the deprivation and the segregation, and every time you know, we have a George Floyd or Arbery, you know, this brings it all back again. You know, I was looking at a piece that was saying Trayvon Martin for this generation, it was about as traumatizing as Emmett Till was for my generation. And I lived through all of that. The Freedom Summers and Freedom Riders and you know, the three civil rights workers killed in Philadelphia, and Medgar Evers, and you know, it's just a long history of trauma and violence against black people, and then at the end of the day, you just have to say, you know, but despite all that, I still love my country. And that sounds absolutely schizophrenic, doesn't it?
Well, that's one of the reasons why you see the American flag throughout this exhibit now.
Right.
It's I don't call the exhibit in the Red Room the slavery exhibit.
Right.
I call it the freedom exhibit.
Right.
Because in spite of it all, in spite of all the tragedy and degradation, we've survived it.
We did.
And so the people who you see represented in this museum are the descendants of the survivors, and so are you.
Well, and I tell people that proudly. I'm a flag waver. My father served in the U.S. Navy. My both brothers served in the U.S. Army. You could not find better patriots than them. You know, I tear up when I see someone take a knee at a funeral and present a flag to a widow, you know, on behalf of a grateful nation. But you know, we can't let ourselves be consumed by hate, and I have to hold on to the knowledge that despite all of the adversities, you know, I was the 25th Chief Justice of the Louisiana Supreme Court.
I know that for our ancestors coming out of slavery and throughout our matriculation in getting an education, that we were taught that education was the key.
It is. It still is.
So
it still is.
Would you speak to that? Education is the key.
Well, yeah, I try to, and when I was Chief Justice, I encouraged judges to go into classrooms for Law Day and Constitution Day and Black History Month and Women's History Month and MLK holiday to interact with young people and try to motivate them, and it's all about expectations. We have to let them know that we expect them to succeed, and you can't whine and complain about what you lack. I tell young people who's struggling with this schizophrenia, I said, you know, you don't understand that you've got the golden ticket. There are other folk around the world who would die to get here, and you have a birth certificate that says you're a U.S. citizen. So you don't have to get on a boat, some makeshift raft out of Haiti or Cuba, and you don't have to go overland from South America, Central America. You don't have to get in some cattle car, pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get here. There are people all over the world who would die and are dying, in fact, to get to America, because America still presents as the land of opportunity. And so here you are with your birth certificate that says you're a U.S. citizen. You don't have to struggle to get here, and you're just wasting, just wasting this opportunity. And so we've got to talk about what they have in hand, and not so much about deprivation and what they're lacking, because when we talk with young people, we have to say, other generations didn't have all these resources that you have. And in fact, free education wasn't available to my mother. My mother's 99. Her mother had to pay to get her on a bus to get to Donaldsonville to go to school, and I think they might have been paying for books. And so education was not always free in Louisiana. I don't know about other states, but so despite the lack of opportunity, we've accomplished a lot. We just can't focus on the deprivation. We've got to encourage young people to take advantage of what they have, because immigrants are coming here from all over the world and starting businesses and working hard. Might have to work at 2-3 minimum wage jobs, but eventually they own things. And we've got to have that mindset. I can own something if I work hard, and looking at what other folk have and seeing that as a disadvantage is, I think, what holds us back.
Over your shoulder is the poster, the Reconstruction poster, with Oscar Dunn, who was Lieutenant Governor.
Sure.
And PBS Pinchback is on that wall.
Sure.
And there's an Article 135 that was presented in 1868 as a part of that Constitutional Convention here in Louisiana about public education. And it's my understanding that Louisiana, those black legislators during Reconstruction, were among the first group of legislators to ever propose a bill for public education.
My children went to McDonough 15 in the French Quarter, and that was, I don't recognize anybody, but
So you said your mother is how old now?
99. She was born in 1922.
So yeah, I will send you a copy of these images.
Sure.
So maybe your mother.
I'll ask her if she recognizes any.
Recognize some
I'll
of
ask
these
her.
ladies. Yes.
Yeah, at McDonough 15 Elementary in the French Quarter, when my children were in elementary school, they had gardens and were raising vegetables. They didn't have chickens and all, but it was a great learning experience to have a child plant something and then watch it grow, because in children who grow up in urban areas don't have a concept of planting and reaping, working and then getting a reward, but they plant their vegetables and then eventually they dig them up and cook them, and their teacher would take them to the A&P or whatever the grocery store was in the French Quarter and get whatever else they need for their cooking class. And so all of that's educational.
Thank you so much.